Hopefully you're going to be thanking me because Black Friday deals have come early for CityCast Chicago listeners. The auditorium is giving you, yes, you, the person listening right now, pay attention. They want to give you early access to their annual Black Friday ticket sale. All you got to do is use code CityCast to get 25% off tickets to shows like Home for the Holidays with Sleeping at Last, Drumline Live, Arrival from Sweden, the music of ABBA, and more. This is a limited time offer while supplies last, my friends, now through November 30th. Visit auditoriumtheater.org and use code CityCast for 25% off select tickets. I've been to no less than 15 weddings in my life, and one constant is every single person wants it to be one of the most special days of their life. And if you want to enjoy it without feeling like you're managing a whole event team, let Simply Elope do it for you. Simply Elope has helped over 14,000 couples, and no two weddings are ever alike. Your dedicated planner takes care of every detail, so whether you want a snowy mountaintop or a sandy beach at sunset, they'll handle the hard stuff. All you got to do is show up and say, I do. Start your big day at simplyelope.com. Today on CityCast Chicago. Since Midway Blitz began in September, we have covered dozens, if not hundreds, of protests, detainments, and the growing violence from the federal government. But for Unhoused Chicagoans detained by agents, what happens when there are no cameras and little record of their disappearance? It's Thursday, November 20th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago is talking about. Today's holiday gift is from our friends at the Auditorium. Check out their early Black Friday ticket sale while supplies last. I'm joined today by a reporter with the Chicago Reader, Katie Prout. Katie, welcome back to the podcast.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me again.
Katie, in your very own words, as federal agents deployed to Chicago, terrorizing, brutalizing, and arresting citizens, non-citizens, press, and anyone else they felt like, unhoused people have been particularly vulnerable to their violence, heavily criminalized, culturally scapegoated, and with fewer smartphones and eyes to notice or bear witness to their abductions. Katie, can you break down what you've learned in your investigation and how unhoused Chicagoans are essentially not being accounted for?
Yeah. So like you said, my background, I've been working on reporting on unhoused Chicagoans, like how they live, how the city treats them, what resources people need for a while now. And I started hearing reports from the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness, as well as from some mutual aid workers about unhoused people being abducted in Chicago during Operation Midway Blitz, right? So day laborers around like the Gompers Park area, folks in Logan Square. We had federal agents, in Bronzeville, in North Park, at shelters there as well, taking people. And when I asked the city if they are tracking these disappearances and what the status of the people that are abducted, I did not get a response. And I want to be generous with that because I know that there has been chaos and pandemonium, and the DHS and the federal government in general is either not forthcoming with information about where people are, or they give dishonest answers. But it feels like unhoused people are particularly vulnerable to disappearance. President Trump has gone at length, as RFK Jr. has as well, about people who are experiencing homelessness basically being like a public enemy, needing to be removed from public space and put into sort of work camps, people with substance use issues needing to be treated the same way. And so when you are unhoused and your immigration status may be vulnerable and you're not white, there's just multiple ways in which you become a target. And I think that there can be fewer resources and like less of a public outcry to find you. And something that when I was thinking about writing this piece, it's like this tension between people that are unhoused are often ignored or pushed to the margins or sort of made invisible by others in our communities who have more resources. We don't always see, our eyes kind of glide by people that
Hmm.
are maybe staying at a bus stop unless there's like a concern about crime or there's like sort of like a panic about how people are using public space. So I think it makes sometimes their disappearances less obvious. But that said, people know you, like when you're in encampment, like are part of a community. People
Uh-huh.
miss you. People, your friends, you share resources, you look out for one another. These are communities where folks are vital members.
Yeah. In your reporting, you mentioned how Chicago's unhoused population has only grown since 2023, especially after Texas Governor Greg Abbott bused approximately 51,000 people to the city over the course of a few years. We saw how shelters were pushed to their capacity. The conditions inside were inhumane. And you mentioned how even in Bronzeville, there were agents who showed up at one of those shelters. How have federal agents engaged with shelters and the people who go in and out of them?
It's again kind of chaotic and it depends on the shelter. It depends on the place. My understanding is that one of the shelters that they showed up at twice, once in September, once in October, in North Park, they did not enter, but they did take people from outside of there. And they I know that like Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness again is offering resources for shelter providers about whether they can let someone, should let an agent in. I think a question and concern is, are they targeting shelters that are known places for new arrivals, or are they kind of just going to shelters for homeless people and seeing who's vulnerable? Some folks I talked to for this story who witnessed abductions of unhoused people near Golf First Park area said that when they saw them, it seemed very like they're just kind of like grabbing first and asking questions later.
Hmm.
The shelters now that we're into one system, they're no longer specifically just for new arrivals or just for longtime Chicagoans. They are divided based on shelters that are families. There are shelters for domestic violence victims. There are shelters for individuals, right? But your immigration status or your arrival to the city is no longer part of it. Yeah, so I think there's still just like a lot of questions,
Hmm.
and not always clear guidance on how to proceed. But a lot of advocates are trying to make their own as they go.
Two of the Chicagoan stories you share are of Theo and Samuel, as you refer to them in the piece. Can you tell us a little bit about them and their communities?
Yeah, I was able to get more on Theo than Samuel. Someone that I spoke with had recently, in the last couple of months, gotten to know Theo more. Said that he had just had a birthday the day before he was taken. He went into this specific, he was an unhoused person who stayed in an encampment near like Lawrence and Pulaski, but he showed up specifically there's like a day labor site, or there was, where people would look for work near there because he really liked the camaraderie of the other people there showing up looking
Hmm.
for work, kind of like helping share resources. Maybe this gig isn't good for you, but it might be good for someone else. That he was recently just like telling this person I spoke to how thankful he was and appreciative of like the local businesses in the area that did not shun, unhoused people that were coming to use their bathrooms or restrooms, and like would actually like give like free food and donate like goods and stuff like that. So he seemed like somebody who is hopeful, someone who is trying to make his way.
So, as Theo was out there, what exactly happened to him and Samuel?
Yeah. So I with Theo, this was on October 29th. There was a group with the Latino Union of Chicago via their Adopt a Corner initiative, which was getting community members together to keep an eye out on certain corners where people might be vulnerable to abduction. People were keeping an eye out on that in that area, and one person who sent me video witnessed Theo being grabbed in the middle of the street. this black SUV pulled into an alley just southeast of the Pulaski and Lawrence intersection. You had agents with U.S. Border Patrol patches jump out of that SUV and grab Theo. They shoved him to his knees, and then they dragged him inside of the vehicle and pushed him inside. And the violence and the speed were striking. I don't think that is unusual for these abductions, right? They're fast. Agents want to be fast because community members are like, Chicago has had it.
Yeah.
People are filming, are intervening, and so they're going as fast as they can. But just like this whole thing happened in less than a minute. And as far as I know, he has not been released, and people are unable to locate his status, like where he is in this fast system. And then while that was happening, it seemed like federal agents were hitting in multiple spots and hitting multiple unhoused people in this area, right? You've got a lot of unhoused people living in Gompers Park and similar parks in the area. So it's kind of like a known place. At the same time that Theo was being abducted, another person who Theo knew, who I'm calling Samuel, was also grabbed by a restaurant on Lawrence Avenue. Both were day laborers, and both the status of both of them is unknown.
This time of year is about tradition for people, and you can make Symphony Center a part of yours. From radiant choral harmonies to unforgettable orchestral moments, Symphony Center helps bring your traditions to life. You can experience the pure magic of Chanticleer's holiday concert, spanning ethereal chant to spirited gospel, or partake in familiar carols and festive favorites at Merry Merry Chicago, Symphony Center's annual holiday extravaganza, and revel in the timeless artistry of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra with performances that capture the wonder of the season. Discover the joy in every note, find your perfect holiday program, and get your tickets today at cso.org/holidays. The holiday season is in full swing, and one of my favorite ways to celebrate low-key is rolling by Millennium Park. You know, when it's all extra pretty, decked out in the lights. And a perfect time to stop by is Chicago's 112th annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony on November 21st. Maybe you want to meet up with your friends, bring your family outside. Maybe you got some people in town early for Thanksgiving. Go on, kick it with your fellow Chicagoans for a night of sparkling lights, holiday cheer, and make some memories with one of the biggest trees this side of the Mississippi. And if you can't wait that long, kick off the season early, starting Friday at 10 a.m. at the McCormick Tribune Ice Skating Rink, and then head over to Millennium Park Holiday Market at noon. The market runs all weekend, and you can find great gifts for everybody in your life and soak in the live entertainment all in a nice festive winter wonderland. And hey, I heard that the Allstate man gonna be out there signing autographs. Nah, I'm messing around. The Enchanted Market experience is made possible with the support of Allstate. Don't miss out. Embrace the holidays at Millennium Park. For more info, visit chicago.gov/holidays. You already know what time of year it is. Toy soldiers, sugar plums, and a rat king. The Joffrey Ballet's The Nutcracker is making its way back from December 5th through the 28th at Lyric Opera House. Joffrey's Nutcracker is one of Chicago's most beloved holiday traditions. Join Marie and her Nutcracker Prince on a fantastical adventure in Tony Award-winning Christopher Wheeldon's kaleidoscope reimagining set amidst the spectacle of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Marie awakes one Christmas Eve to be swept away by a flurry of snowflakes to the dreamlike fairgrounds of the World's Columbian Exposition, and she embarks on a magical adventure you'll never forget. Seriously, the trio calls it unforgettable. Tickets for the Nutcracker are on sale now at joffrey.org. For the last couple of months, we've been talking about the Broadview facility where a ton of detainees have found themselves abducted and taken before quickly moved somewhere else. Do we have any sense of where that place is when unhoused Chicagoans are being abducted off the street? Are they also being taken out to Broadview, or do we just not know?
I had no idea. I would guess Broadview, but guess isn't a fact, right? And that's what's so one of the many things that's just so crappy about this. I know that like Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness, they're, trying to understand whereabouts. The Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights has also been trying to track, but they're overwhelmed with requests for help. So yeah, I'm not sure.
I just read a story from Block Club Chicago that some 400 arrested by ICE in Chicago between, I think, June and October are set to be released this week. Do we have any sense of how many unhoused Chicagoans have been detained over the course of this operation?
I was able to document at least 26 people being taken. But it's really like there's whole neighborhoods on, like the south side where I just like wasn't able to make contact with like outreach providers or find people that are watching.
Yeah. You said in your piece that some advocates argue that abductions by federal agents are not separate from the city's approach to encampment sweeps, but rather a continuation of it. Can you remind folks, what does it mean when an encampment like those in Humboldt Park, Legion Park, Gumpers Park is swept and cleared? What does that look like?
Thank you for asking that question. That's something I'm working on for an upcoming story because I want to make sure that Chicagoans really understand what that means because I feel like there's a lot of like assumptions and euphemism. But yeah, when encampment sweep, an encampment clearing, a closure, I usually often refer to it in my reporting as an eviction because that is what it qualifies as. There is a time period beforehand in which people that are living in an encampment that's identified by the city as a place that you cannot live, right? So we're talking about under viaducts, in city parks. They are supposed to be contacted by outreach workers with the city, usually through Department of Family Support Services, and like offered connections to shelter, help applying for longer term housing, a data set that folks just like have to be out of there by. And if they're not out of there by, you have Department of Streets and Sanitation coming with bulldozers, like whole bulldozers, giant garbages. You have Chicago police officers. You have outreach workers. And you have community members, both like for and against these evictions, and people that are living in tents. Those tents are picked up by those bulldozers and destroyed. People lose their belongings. They lose their connections. They lose papers. And this is a time period where you really don't want to lose your identification, given that we have federal agents demanding you show it, which may or may not be legal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is framed by, some people are connected to shelters that are temporary and hopefully then from there onto housing. A lot of people then just sort of have to move to another camp, another viaduct with even fewer resources than they had before. People are hopefully given time to collect their belongings and collapse and move their tent if they can. This is happening in like 17-degree weather. It doesn't matter if it's below 32 degrees or not. People are moving from place to place to place to place, right? And you don't have enough shelter beds in the city. Shelters are temporary. And then even if you call 311 and ask for a shelter bed, the average wait for a shelter bed in the city is 19 days. What are you supposed to do for that 19 days? Where do you go? Folks that have winterized their tents, that are unable to move those tents because they've made them as like sturdy places, like that are like kind of winterproof, they might have to leave those and find like a less safe option to try to stay. There is no emergency shelter for unhoused single people on the far northwest side of the city. What that means is that people, like the majority of folks, I've talked to advocates, I've talked to state representatives, Lindsay LaPointe being one of them. I talked with Alder Ruth Cruz Monday about this call. There's like a new call to build a shelter in that area, and she'd love to see it in her ward. They both say that the majority of unhoused people in their area are older adults over the age of 50 who have mobility issues, who are disabled. So when they are getting evicted from these camps, the shelters that they are getting offered are in neighborhoods that they maybe have never been to, that are
Mm-hmm.
far away from their doctor appointment, and that are not in the neighborhoods where they grew up. So they're going to some place that's like a temporary spot Shelters are important. We need more of them. We need more shelter beds, but they are not the solution to homelessness in Chicago. I would say that more affordable housing is. And I think that there are parallels between these local encampment evictions and national deportations. Among them is like who is called a threat to public safety, whose presence is considered unsafe in public space. Who do we think as a culture and community deserves to live in a space, and who gets to be a member of the public? These questions sound like existential, but they are materializing in policy and how people are treated.
Yeah, I mean, we've speculated for weeks now if federal agents will start leaving the city and winding down the terror campaign. But as we know, this hasn't been the only way the federal government has been targeting the unhoused, from the increased attacks that we've kind of covered in this conversation. But the administration is also upending sort of decades long homelessness policy with deep cuts to funding for long-term housing, one of the best solutions and most practical solutions we can talk about. Can you kind of give us a sense of how this $3.9 billion in cuts is going to impact organizations?
So there's something called rapid rehousing in Chicago, well, in the country. But rapid rehousing is something that people in shelters and encampments are offered to get connected to. That rapid rehousing funding lasts up to 2 years. That pays for somebody's rent. But then people have to find a way to pay their own rent after. Usually, you're talking about folks that are disabled, that are dealing with severe mental illness, that are elderly, and many of them then qualify for something called permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is great. That is my objective journalist opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Permanent supportive housing is resources that keep people housed, that gets them connected to social services, and this is good for their health outcomes. This is good for their connection to community. It's good for all of us. So it helps pay for their rent. But that permanent supportive housing, I believe, usually up to 80% of the money that housing providers are getting through this continuum of care, this like federal body that disperses the money, like in Chicago, 80% of that usually goes to permanent supportive housing because there's such a huge need. And that's just like paying for people's rent and social support services. The federal government wants to cut that to 30, or like maybe like 33. And that is an enormous cut at a time where the state and the city budgets are already strapped. Like, where is that money going to come from? People are not going to be able to make their rent, right? And at the same time, we're looking at all of these new limitations being proposed around SNAP, around food assistance benefits. You have to show documentation in the coming months. You might have to show documentation that you're looking for work, that you are working, or that you're at least volunteering. People are going to be forced to choose between paying their rent or paying for food. And this is just like it's a humanitarian crisis that doesn't have to happen with these HUD changes. One of the things is federal funding being contingent on how do providers define gender? How does your municipality work with ICE agents? And these are people that, if you're trans, if you are non-white, if your documentation status is vulnerable, those increase unfortunately in this country, your likelihood of being homeless. And then meanwhile, the city is still planning camp evictions for the winter. Where are people going to go? These federal funding cuts will have to be made up somewhere if we're going to keep people housed. And right now, I'm not sure of where that money is going to come from. There are possibilities of can we call for an eviction moratorium, right? At least temporarily, to keep people housed. That's been something proposed by various tenant unions. Johnson said something about maybe looking into it, I think, at a news conference. Pritzker has not returned requests for comment from other outlets that I've seen about it. Yeah, I'm not really sure what the plan is on the city level as well as the state.
Yeah. I mean, as you point out, the stricter requirements about who can get access to SNAP benefits, who can get access to funding for housing, the deep cuts that the federal government is planning to make pretty swiftly. Some of these cuts are likely to go into effect at the very start of the year. Advocates warn that up to 200,000 people could be at risk of losing their housing across the country. When someone is being detained, we have seen how difficult it can be for their family networks to track them down, how long it can take to ever hear from them or see them. Unhoused Chicagoans may not always have people who have the resources to navigate those hurdles if they disappear. How have you seen advocates and organizations in the city step up to look out for unhoused individuals who they worry are increasingly vulnerable to ICE?
So I know that there are many outreach providers across the city who are in conversation with one another, who are talking to the unhoused people they work with, putting together Know Your Rights campaign information that are specific to people who. What are your rights if you are riding a CTA and maybe sheltering on the CTA? If a federal agent is talking to you or tries to detain you, what are your rights if you're in a city park? What if your rights if you're like kind of camped out near O'Hare? And people can find more about that if they look at the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness website. We also have that information in English and in Spanish on the Chicago Reader website. I think that people, by getting to know your neighbors, housed and unhoused, we've shown like a tremendous ability to like support each other, to feed each other, to help people shelter in place if they can't leave their house or if they can't leave their tent. I think, you know, people are checking in various mutual aid groups, but also kind of like less organized as well, just like asking folks if they need food, so they don't have to go like panhandle to get that food. If they're working, if they need a ride from the encampment to where they're working. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways in which I think people are showing up and caring for one another.
Mhm. What are you going to be paying attention to most, especially as it gets colder and colder in the city?
You know, um, the city doesn't have a ton of control over a lot right now in some ways, right? Like federal agents popping up and showing up, um, what they're doing. I've meant keep using this word, but a lot of chaos. But what the city can choose to do differently are these encampment evictions. That is something I think that the city does have control over. And the something that I'm looking forward to digging in more over the next couple of months is what policy, if any, exists around these closures, these evictions? Why do they happen in some places and not others? Is there a mechanism? Is it a certain number of people? Is it a certain number of complaints from alders? Like, what is this? What is it? I've been trying to get an answer for that for a while, and I am looking forward to not giving up.
I appreciate you also reminding people, the folks who are most vulnerable to being unhoused, Black queer youth, disabled veterans,
Mhm.
elderly who have mobility issues or who are suffering from different mental health conditions. I really appreciate you saying that because these are people who are already criminalized, even if they are not unhoused, who are
Mhm.
already having it made more difficult for them to get food, to get access to health care, to get access to the type of resources they need to just go about their daily lives.
Mhm. Job
And
discrimination, like.
exactly. And so it's like criminalizing people into the point and marginalizing people into the point in which they are facing extreme precarity, unhoused, and then doubling down on that criminalization. And so I think to your point, it is, for the city and the state who talk about, providing some sort of pushback to the federal government. Like you said, this can't just be reactive, finding shelter beds. It has to be providing affordable health care broadly across the city, but also providing more resources for these exact communities who are being targeted at every level. And so I really appreciate you kind of taking the time to flesh that out.
Yeah, thanks for asking about it. If we don't have the resources right now, then perhaps it is not the most humane, but also fiscally responsible to spend resources to then just simply evict people into a
Mhm.
further precarity until we have better resources to offer them. I am curious what it would look like if the city changed its approach and allowed people to be where they're at until there's a viable, sustainable option for them.
I want to give a huge thank you to our guest today from the Chicago Reader, Katie Prout. Thank you so much for making time for CityCast Chicago.
Yeah, thanks. I love being on. You guys do tremendous work, and I'm super glad to be here talking about this. So thank you.
Before we get out of here, I got some good news for you. There are a few events I wanted to put on your radar coming up, including tonight, Respect the Mic, the very last one of the year, is going down at Monday Coffee. You've got Play Date with an all-women and femme DJ lineup at Connect Gallery this Saturday from 12 to 7, and then Last Minute Mic, queer comedy at the Crib Comedy Play Space, 7 o'clock on Sunday. For more great events, please head over to our website, chicago.citycast.fm, and peruse through our events calendar. And while you're there, make sure you are subscribed to our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Our newsletter editor, Emmy Mack, is working tirelessly every single day to put out one of Chicago's absolute best newsletters. So please follow along. Make sure you tuned into our social media. Our manager, Rick Homuth, is putting out some fantastic videos every single week. So please go ahead, give it a like, give it a comment, give it a share. And then last but not least, make sure you're back here bright and early tomorrow. We will talk to you then. Peace.
Guess what? CityCast has some news. I'm Sean McPherson, the host of CityCast Twin Cities.
And I'm Jane Sihu, and I'm the host of CityCast Seattle. Hey, if you have a friend in one of our cities, can you text them for us?
Yeah, something, simple like, hey, how's that rash doing? And do you listen to podcasts? Because I have one you're definitely going to like. After that, tell them that CityCast has helped you become more informed, more involved, and more connected to your amazing city.
We're going to help that person you know in Seattle who's been trying to make friends.
And we're also going to do that for that guy you only kind of knew in college who moved back to the Twin Cities after graduation.
Don't we all have that guy?
Yeah, and usually that guy is named Todd.
So did you text them yet?
Jane, let's just wait a minute. We don't want to rush anybody. We'll do a little small talk. How's everything going in Seattle?
Beautiful, beautiful. Fall leaves popping. How about Twin Cities?
Today, beautiful and sunshiny in St. Paul. Okay, Jane, I bet they are done texting by now, and I just want to remind them, hey, you, please tell that friend to subscribe to CityCast Twin Cities or Seattle, wherever you get your podcasts.
Or if you don't want to text them and you're really just on Instagram sending them DMs all the time with funny videos, send them a DM of our latest videos. You can find us at CityCast Twin Cities or CityCast Seattle on Instagram. Thanks.